Now, without more ado, I'd like to move into the core business of today's events, and I'm delighted to call upon one of Sweden's senior scientists, Professor Thomas B. Johansson, to speak on a subject that is close to my heart, namely the need for education to meet global sustainability challenges. Representing the YMP Foundation today, Professor Johansson is currently co-chair of the Executive Committee of the Global Energy Assessment. He's the former director of the Energy and Atmosphere Programme at UNDP. He was convening lead author of the IPCC Second Assessment Reports on Energy Supply Mitigation Options from 1992 to 1996, and thereby partakes as a co-recipient of the Nobel Prize awarded to the IPCC in 2007. Professor Johansson, you're very welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Director, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first put on another former hat that I used to have as director for the International Institute for Industrial and Environmental Economics, and also UNESCO chair, having been working with the Young Masters Program for quite some time. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank UNESCO for the very good cooperation we've had, and we're very delighted that we've had it, and we're looking forward to the continuation of it. Now, of course, education or sustainable development goes together. We've had the sustainable development debates going on now for something like 25 years, so that's a well-known topic. We have had education for sustainable development coming to the fore at the Rio conference and again at the Johannesburg conference, now almost 10 years ago. And we're looking forward to the continuation of that. So I think it's appropriate to say, well, where do we actually stand on the sustainability issues, and what is required when it comes to education for sustainable development. If you look at these graphs, they all have a time frame from 1750 to 2000, and there are various parameters, as you can see, like population, like GDP, like tourism, like various emissions, and so forth. And you see the characteristics of all of these graphs are that they increased rather dramatically for the last few decades. So we are in a situation of rapid change that we don't necessarily notice very well every day, because on a daily basis or annual basis it's not so dramatic. But if you look at the large changes that are behind here in many parameters, also many more than those shown here, we are really in a critical period. And as the ambassador mentioned, we are in some cases approaching planetary boundaries. In some cases they have been succeeded. This is a representation of 9 different concerns or planetary boundaries, like chemical pollution, climate change, ocean acidification, and so forth. And there's sort of a safe area in the middle, the green one. And as you can see, there are 3 cases where the world is way beyond: biodiversity loss, climate change, and the nitrogen cycle. Excuse me. Now, this means, of course, that unless there are rather dramatic action taken, we will see a deterioration of not only the environmental dimension of sustainability, but also the economic and the social ones. And the question is, of course, what can be done and how can we actually do it, because it requires action in many dimensions. And I'll show you one concern, which is the climate term. This was an evaluation of the seriousness of global warming done by IPCC in the 3rd assessment report. It comes in 5 different categories, and I will not go into the details, but here is a temperature scale from the pre-industrial to the present, plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees. And as you can see, as warming increases, the judgment 10 years ago was that it's getting more and more dangerous for the world. Now, if we look at what happened 10 years later, this is the same evaluation, the same scale, the same parameters. But as you can see, the red fields have moved down by a little more than 1 degree. So that is the consequence of the increased understanding of what is going on. This is the 2-degree line that is, as you've heard about so many times. And if you look at what it represented 10 years ago, maybe this would have been acceptable and not dangerous in the words of the Climate Convention. But if you look at the present situation, 2 degrees is certainly not very safe, as you can see. And if you look at where the world is heading, this is what the declarations of governments after Cancun will take us. And this is where people generally think we ought to stay, that is below 1.5 degrees, and quite likely, seeing what has happened so far with the impacts of global warming on various Earth systems, that is on the high side as well. Now, if you look at what to do about this, you can make the observation first that energy systems contribute something like 60% or so of global greenhouse gases, or global warming, more precisely. And if you want to stay below the 2 degrees, with 2/3 probability, not as high a probability as you have in Russian roulette, but still, these are the emissions trajectories that one would have to follow. And as you can see, it's coming close to 0 in the middle of the century. And it essentially needs to peak just about now, which it isn't, because emissions are growing by something like 3%, give or take, a year at present, and has done so for the last 10 years. Because if you reach a peak in 10 years, then the reduction rate of emissions is about 9% per year in this case, and that is approximately the same as saying that it won't happen. So that's the scale of the challenge we are facing. Now, if we look at the characteristics then of the situation, it's global, it's changing rapidly, we are at or close to planetary boundaries in many dimensions, and major changes are required in economies of various kinds, and it's urgent. Now, how can we see this change coming? We need to understand what the challenges are. We need to understand the options, create some motivation. And understanding the challenges, we're looking at the situation where we have rather well-developed research and development. But we have it in such a way that we have rather vertical orientation of actions. We have people that know a lot about biology and biodiversity. They don't know a lot about engineering systems or political systems or institutions and policies. And you can go through the spectrum of academic disciplines, and they're very vertical by and large in their orientation. This is something we need to create a better understanding of the linkages and the crossings to make it possible to address issues like we are now looking at. So there's rather limited transfers of these understandings. If you look at schools, you have basically the same system. Curricula are limited, and teachers are not systematically trained or educated on the complexities of sustainability issues. There are a number of very encouraging exceptions to that, but this by and large is the situation, I think I can safely say, all around the world, certainly in Sweden. Now, if we then look at educational efforts that needs to be enhanced and complement each other, they come in various forms and fashions. But one is that sustainability at present is not an integral part of all education, which it needs to be, so that all the linkages and the situations are being brought forward. We certainly need specialists and specialists that understand the broader settings of their specialties. We need to educate the educators, and we need to educate people. So there's a long list of things that are required. And we are in the Young Masters program trying to reach out, as you know, to high school students and to generate classrooms, conversations, and integrated knowledge through the internet, but also through meetings in person. And it's very encouraging to see that this is something which is underway, something that can be enhanced. And I was looking at UNESCO's homepage, and I found a number of very nice what-if formulations. And I'll show them to you. And this is what it is about. What if we could generate the education for people that enables them and empowers them to do their part for sustainable development? Thank you.